This is Rachel Dworkin from the Chemung County Historical Society. Today is June 15th, 2022. I am here interviewing Gloria Dick at her home at 95 Davenport Road in Big Flats. Gloria, how old are you?
Well, I'm 91.
Okay, and
I will be 92 September 1st.
Okay, so how long have you lived in Big Flats?
We moved here in the spring of 53.
Okay, and you grew up in Elmira beforehand?
Yes, I grew up on Bonneview Avenue on the south side of Elmira.
Okay. So you were living here in Big Flats during the flood of 1972.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about what that experience was like?
Well, we were very conscious of how much it was raining. We had a small greenhouse on the other side of our house. And we were in full season, and we were walking in about a foot of water. And we knew something was unusual. That weekend was our 22nd wedding anniversary. And all of a sudden, water was everywhere. We realized Big Flats was flooding. At the time, they did not have the effective dams out to Tioga. And it just kept coming until it reached across from us in the farmland across the road. It came up to the road, but the road was always open. We have, excuse me.
Do you want me to?
We realized that people were evacuating, moving up the hill. We have a high hill in back of us, so we're on a gradual rise here. And we figured if it came up the road, we could go up the hill. Our surprise was our future son-in-law came over the hill from Corning. He had ended up, someone gave him a ride on a horse. We boarded him at our house, and the next day he walked back to Corning with all the frozen chicken we had in our freezer. His mother had 14 people boarding in her house, and she could use the food, and of course we had no electricity and would lose the meat anyway.
How long were you without power after the flood?
Oh, I think about a week. We had, being June, heat was no problem. We had a spring-fed greenhouse. The water came from up the hill, so it was not polluted. And that was gravity-fed, so we had water, and we gave all our neighbors water. We put a sign out that we had water. Now, we only gave it for drinking, and the people that came with the big milk cans, they wanted it for their toilets and such. We told them to get it out of the ditch, because we have ditches on our property, and the ditches were pure. You probably could have drank it, but we just told them that it was clean enough for them to heat, if they had heat, for their dishes. And the spring fed, we had never tested it for drinking, but we knew it was not polluted by flood water. We told them it might be a frog in it. and
So how many people were living in your household at the time?
Well, we had 4 people living here.
So you, your husband, and 2 children?
Well, no, my son was in New England. My daughter was here, and my future son-in-law was here a little bit.
Okay.
The other thing I already mentioned, water. I gave the fire department water. I don't know whether they were feeding people, but they were feeding the rescue crews. And the one I remember about the water is we had glass jugs. And I had quite a few, and I gave those away. And we were still, unfortunately, under nuclear threat at the time. We didn't know what we would have some nuclear threat. Some people will remember the children were taught to go under the desk at school.
Mm-hmm.
But I had quite a few canned goods, and most of those went to the fire department for support. They were making sandwiches for their own crews that were going in the boats and things like that. Big Flats had the additional problem of some of the oil storage units had tipped over, and I guess they were able to, I was never quite sure of this, but I believe they were able to rescue the oil off of the top of the water in some manner. And they were very, very afraid of fire until they got the oil off the surface.
So you had a greenhouse. Was that like vegetables or flowers?
Well, it was spring bedding plants, what they call bedding plants. We grew from seed and cuttings. People at that time did a lot of cemetery pots and things. I did those by the dozen. Tomato plants and pepper plants and individual squash and that. Anything you would grow from seed, plus things like geraniums, and I made up the cemetery.
And did you lose anything as a result of the flood, or did it all come through okay?
Well, our season was sort of winding down by then. Usually by 4th of July or so, our season pretty much ends. But my benches were above the water, so I didn't. And the ironic thing was I had the water. So.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add about 1972 flood?
Well, it was quite an experience. Everybody that was in the flood area, they just had piles and piles of home furnishings. And they had a big dump down where the park is now. And they dumped everything down there and then moved it somewhere else later.
Which park? Like,
Uh, the, the one for the state trooper.
oh, Spear Park?
Yeah,
Okay.
that was, I think it was just farmland at that time, and it was able to get to it. And it was above flood.
Okay. So you were also alive for the 1946 flood, and you were living in Elmira. Can you tell me what you remember about that?
Well, I was in high school at that time. I went to school, but that particular area we were in was, so I lived in a block between Mount Sword and the very end of Hudson Street,
Okay.
on a street called Bonneville Avenue. And we did not move, but it was such that they had dikes protecting the city, and they had dikes protecting Bradley's, the older Bradley farm. And it made a cul-de-sac so that the river front was lower in that particular block. And the flood went in there and scoured the houses. It was up to the second story, and it moved some of them, and well, left about a foot of mud on everything. And of course, it cut Southport off from Elmira.
Mm-hmm.
I had an uncle that lived in the area flooded. He came up the hill. There was a rise in Bonneville Avenue, and he stayed with us for quite a while. And I remember he went to a bakery that was on the south side and got bread and stuff because there was no great big supermarkets available at that time. At that time also the dike was, well, south side got it quite bad.
Okay. So what your house wasn't affected though?
No, there is a natural rise from the old riverbed on several streets there.
Okay, well it sounds like you got lucky living on just on top of a natural
Yeah.
rise twice.
Well, the same thing happened in the 72 flood. My mother and dad were above the flood. I was, of course, worried with them because Southport was separated from Elmira. They both flooded, but most of the bridges went out. I was worried. I couldn't contact my parents. I had, at the time, I had a Corvair, and I said to my son-in-law, if he would go with me, I thought that I could get over some of the bridges up on the rise on the Mount Zor rise of mountains there. I thought I could go that we could go to Corning
Mm-hmm.
and go up around and ride the ridges back down into Elmira. And he said, well, I'll do better than that. I thought my car would be light enough that it could go over the little bridges up in the hills. And he said he would. I had my first motorcycle ride.
Oh, wow.
So we went to Corning and we rode the ridges and came down into Southport. And I was able to see my mother and dad after a few days.
Well, that's good. That sounds like quite the experience.
It was cold, surprisingly. It was very, very cold. We stopped at his aunt and uncle's on the way, and I got a heavy jacket that I put on. And of course, I was not driving. I was holding on for dear life.
Wow. And they were okay? Had they evacuated, or were they just still at the
No,
hospital?
they were there, and they were actually acting, the people at the, I'm not sure whether it was law, whatever, I think it was military. I think they would use my dad to identify people that lived in the neighborhood so that they could come in and pick their strawberries or berries or whatever they wanted to get. Now across down to the below the rise in Bonneview Avenue, it was my one brother had gotten home from service. My other brother had not yet gotten home from World War I, II. He had left a kayak in the process he was building. He'd left it home, and my brother that was home was ferrying people to their second story so they could get whatever they'd put up there, and maybe money, valuables and things.
And so that was in 1946?
Yes.
Okay.
You see, the war was just over, and not all the military were home. The ones that they came home on a premium system of who had been over there longest. They had a counting system of what action they'd seen and how long they'd been there, and what unit they were in and so forth. And they came home on just what service they'd seen.
Okay.
And the one had just got home, and the other didn't come for a while.
Okay. Are there any other stories about either living in big flats or about, growing up that you would like to share, or about your family?
Oh my. Maybe you might better ask me questions because...
Something more specific? Okay. Tell me a little bit about...
Well, the one thing I would like to say...
Okay.
Is we lived here quite long, and we knew we wanted to build a greenhouse to take advantage of our... We had worked even out of state, but we found that mostly the small greenhouses were family owned, and there was no chance of advancement. And so we decided we would need to build our own. And we did that by moving one from Ithaca that we knew was going to be replaced by um, a, a big grocery store. The we when we built, we were looking for a piece of land that was southward facing, and when we found the land, we built a house. But unfortunately, when we first built, we had no electricity on this road. It stopped at our neighbor's house. And we were able to build they said they would build let us have electricity 500 feet away. So we started building, and we built a good share of our house without electricity before we got it, it must have been about 5-6 months later.
So by the time the house was finished, you had electricity?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, no. We moved in before so I had the experience of living in a house without electricity.
So, what did you do for refrigeration?
An ice box.
Oh, okay. So you...
I took my refrigerator and used it as an ice box, and we would get a big block of ice. I still remember that from my childhood. When people, apparently ice boxes were not available till, I don't know, late 30s maybe.
So where would you get your ice for that?
Oh, they had places. There was, even now you can get black ice.
Okay. So you had mentioned that your family had lived in this region for a while. Can you tell us a little bit about your family history?
Well, my dad came here, as near as I can figure, about 1909 in Elmira. He came from down in Susquehanna County, Pennsylvania. His father was in the boiler making deal, and my dad was born in Forest City, which is down in the coal region.
Mm-hmm.
And they lived in a small town that was settled by Connecticut settlers, a small town called Mount Ararat. It still has some, it's still a small town down there. And they came up, and I think they came for the work in Kennedy, what's now Kennedy Valve.
Okay. So, what did your father do when you were growing up?
My father was a contractor. He worked around Elmira, and he worked in Corning. He ended up, he also became a contractor. He had a going business when World War II took all his young men, so he didn't have anybody, and he worked on military work.
Oh, okay.
He worked up on oh, Seneca Lakes, the military depot up there. He had to get, it was very hard for him to get a birth certificate for 1900 down in Pennsylvania. He had to have affidavit sworn that he was a citizen.
What was his name?
Ralph Walker.
Okay. And what about your mom? What did she do?
Well, she did not do military work, but she took care of children. I was still in grade school at the time, and she took care of women, children, toddlers that worked, maybe at the Eclipse or some of the other plants.
Okay. So like a daycare.
Well, they'd call it daycare now.
Okay. Very neat. So it was your 21st anniversary, you said?
22nd.
22nd. So you got married in 1950.
We got married the weekend the Korean War broke.
Wow, okay.
And we celebrated our 22nd anniversary with the 72 flood.
That's some timing. So
Well, my husband had been a Marine in World War II. He'd been on Guadalcanal, and he eventually came home with all the sicknesses that they had on the West Coast. He came in had been evacuated by return airplane to Australia, and then he came home on a Red Cross freighter with no guard all across the Pacific, and they landed on the West Coast, and he was in a military hospital there for a while.
had you known him before the war?
No. I met him at Alfred. He was there on the GI Bill.
Okay, so you were both college students together.
Yes.
What did you study?
Floriculture.
Okay, that explains why you had a greenhouse. Was he also studying that, or was he studying?
Yes, he was studying that. He had been in college when World War broke, and he enlisted early on. He was home for Christmas vacation or shortly thereafter, and signed up.
Okay. So, any other stories you'd like to share? Did you do anything interesting during the war?
Well, considering I do remember it coming over the radio about Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
My two brothers were in Europe. They actually met over there. My one brother'd been over a long time, and the other brother went over. They actually met in the shower. They were both in the Battle of the Bulge.
Mm-hmm.
My one brother was one brother was over there for a considerable length of time.
And what was his name?
Robert Walker.
Okay.
He was in England, he had joined, he had his pilot license from our small Big Flats airport, private pilot license, and he thought probably he would be going in to the Air Force, but I think they valued him more. He was a graduate of our business institute. He could type, and he also had shortwave radio experience, which they found was very handy during the flood of '72. He was talking to people different places on the radio, and anyway, he was in Patton's. He was in the cavalry,
Mm-hmm.
which at the time was armored cars, and he was with Patton, and he was ran the radio.
Oh, very neat.
He got in minor trouble for the fact when he said Paris was free. He heard that, and he told somebody, and he got in trouble because he told somebody. But he went all the way into Germany, and my other brother went in when he was just turned 18. They fast-tracked him. He was over there by cold weather. He was in Germany. I don't know just what he was doing, but he managed to fall in the Rhine River, and he was a very strong swimmer. I don't know the story, but I know he ended up with a Bronze Star, and I know they don't give you that for falling into the river. So he had a Bronze Star on his 19th birthday.
Okay. So maybe someone else fell in the river and he jumped in to get him or something?
Oh no, they were crossing it.
Oh, okay.
Whether he swam it or whether he fell in or I know he also was an expert marksman, and it had something to do with that.
Ah, okay. So you had said something about how your brother's radio experience was handy during the '72 flood. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, our neighbor, he had our neighbor had in his attic, he had a shortwave radio, and Bob was very interested in it. That's before I have good memory.
Okay, so that was...
He learned from the neighbor how to do it, and then when he went in service, of course, that was his deal he was strong at, and he was company clerk and radio operator, and I don't know what he was using it as, but I think the neighbor was still there, and they were talking to people around neighboring places.
Oh, okay, so that was in 1946 when they...
Yes,
okay.
after he came home from war.
Okay. All right, thank you. Is there anything else you would like to share?
I don't think of anything right offhand.
Okay, well, thank you very much for talking with me.